A gang boss is on all fours, barking, like a dog, in front of his own crew. A 20-meter dragon, the kind that wiped out entire armies of A-rank hunters, drops dead from a single strike. A corrupted S-rank hero's voice plays on a speaker in a crowded international ballroom, detailing exactly how he planned to murder his colleagues. And the man is standing right there in the room. A massive earthquake-level attack slams into a reinforced compound. And inside, an old grandmother doesn't even look up from her massage chair. And somewhere at the very beginning of all of this, a god-tier warrior from a completely destroyed world wakes up inside the body of a broke, bullied, abandoned teenager, and decides to make every single person who wronged this kid regret it. Rewind. All the way back to where this insanity starts. We are in a dungeon, not a starter dungeon, not a training run. We are deep inside an S-rank gate, the kind of place where a single wrong move ends careers permanently, and most heroes show up with full tactical squads and a prayer. The elite team moving through this hellhole is tight, professional, and very, very tense. Standard formation. Everyone watching every shadow, because the monsters in here could flatten a city block without sweating. And then there's this one guy. No one knows him. He's new. And while the entire squad is carefully managing their spacing and mana output like trained professionals, this guy just walks forward. Casual. Relaxed. Like he's taking a stroll through a park. Then the cockatrice appears. Now, quick world lesson. A cockatrice in this tier is a nightmare creature. We're talking stone-cold monster, easily capable of wiping a mid-rank hero squad. The whole team tenses. Defensive positions snap into place instantly. This guy doesn't stop walking. The beast lunges. A strike that could cave in a building. He sidesteps it so cleanly it almost looks accidental. One strike back. One. And the thing crumples. The squad just stands there, staring. His name is Seo Dojan, and that is the least impressive thing he does in this story. Here's the truth that nobody in this world knows yet. Seo Dojan is not from here. The body is his, technically, but the soul inside it is a completely different person. In another world, a world that doesn't exist anymore, he was called Carcelian Levandian, the sword god, a legendary warrior who reached the absolute peak of combat mastery in a place where monsters weren't just dungeon obstacles, they were apocalyptic forces capable of erasing civilizations. And that world? It got erased. Completely. Monsters on a scale that even his sword couldn't stop in time. His country, his people, everyone he ever loved, gone. He fought until the very end. And then, in whatever space exists between worlds, he found something. A boy. A dying boy. Barely clinging to existence in the void, with no power and no reason to survive. That boy was the real Seo Dojan, a 17-year-old South Korean kid who had been dealt the worst hand imaginable. Born illegitimate, born poor. Raised by a grandmother and a half-sister who loved him completely, but had almost nothing. And after his mother died when he was 7, his biological father's legitimate family made sure to throw him out like garbage. No contact, no support, just gone. The original Seo Dojan, dying in that void, had one thing left he wanted. One wish. He didn't ask for revenge, even though he deserved to ask for it. He just wanted his grandmother and his little sister Yunyong to be safe, to have a good life, to not suffer anymore. Carcelian heard that wish, and he agreed to carry it. So the sword god, a being who mastered combat in a world that makes Earth's monsters look like stray cats, wakes up inside a teenager's scrawny body in South Korea, and immediately discovers the limitations. Earth's mana is thin. Compared to his homeworld, the environmental density is barely 10% of what he's used to, which means he's operating at roughly 1/10 of his original power. 1/10 of a sword god is still more dangerous than anything on this planet. But he's patient, and he has a plan. Step 1. Learn the rules of this world. And this world runs on gates and rifts. Gates are the structured monster portals. Government-controlled, regulated, dispatched with licensed hunter teams. You need a hero license to legally enter. The monsters inside drop mana stones when killed, and those stones fuel the entire economy. There's a ranking system, low tier all the way up through B rank, A rank, and S rank, for both the hunters and the dungeons themselves. S rank hunters are essentially walking national assets. There are only a handful of them. Rifts are different. Rifts are unstable. No government oversight. They crack open wherever they want, and if left uncleared, They trigger monster waves that can level entire city districts. The kind of thing that wakes up the whole country in a panic. Dojan absorbs all of this. Then he goes to a C-rank gate without a license. Because why not? The licensed team already inside is a typical squad of mid-tier hunters. Arrogant, territorial, exactly the type who've never met anyone who could actually threaten them personally. They spot Dojan, young, no gear, no ID, and immediately start the posturing. Unlicensed entry is a serious offense. They pull rank, they puff up. He ignores every word of it, walks past them, finds the dungeon boss, a giant troll, the kind that requires coordinated team tactics to bring down safely, and takes it apart with casual efficiency. The troll swings. Dojan is already somewhere else. The counterattack is immediate and surgical. What should have been a lengthy team battle takes roughly as long as ordering coffee. He walks back out, drops the cleared proof. The licensed squad is speechless. The gate control agents waiting outside are not speechless. They're furious. Unlicensed dungeon entry is a criminal offense, and these agents have grade 4 magic staves to enforce it. They move to arrest him. Dojan looks at the staves. He looks at the agents. He takes the staves apart without significant effort and sends every agent home significantly humbler than they arrived. No one dies. He's not here to cause incidents. He just needs to be left alone. Word starts to move. Something unusual happened at a C-rank gate. People are paying attention. But Dojan already has his next problem, money. His grandmother is sick. He doesn't know how sick yet, but he knows she's struggling. His sister Yunyong needs a real future. And the original family debt situation is a mess. The loan sharks who have been circling this household know they're dealing with what they think is a helpless teenager with no leverage. They show up at the house, 3 of them, running hard collection tactics, demanding 48 million won immediately. Dojan answers the door. He listens to the whole pitch. Then he hits every one of them efficiently enough that the only thing left to do is send a message back to their boss. The message is simple. He's coming for the organization. Personally. But first, money. He needs a way to convert dungeon materials into actual cash, and the obvious route is a mana stone trading store. There's one nearby run by a merchant who thinks he has leverage because he's the most accessible buyer in the area. This merchant looks at Dojan, does the math on broke teenager with no connections, and offers a deal. He'll buy Dojan's stones at a 40% commission rate. 40%. The greed is genuinely impressive. Dojan doesn't argue. He doesn't negotiate yet. He watches the merchant call in the 2 high-rank guards he keeps on the premises as insurance. These guards are meant to be the conversation ender, the silent threat that makes clients accept bad terms and leave. Dojan puts both guards on the floor without breaking his posture. Then he walks back to the merchant and clarifies the new commission rate. 1%. Not 40, 1. The merchant, currently watching his security investment fail to stand up, accepts immediately. Business established. Now for the bigger score. He goes into a B-rank snake dungeon using a fake B-rank hero identity. A bold move, since operating above your licensed tier is exactly the kind of thing that ends careers, and clears the entire thing solo. Not just clears it, he harvests it. High-grade snake materials, venom sacs, rare components that legitimate B-rank teams would struggle to extract efficiently from a full dungeon run, including a massive viper fang, which he pulls with specific intent, eyeing it like someone who already knows what he wants built out of it later. He brings the haul back to the store owner and extorts 150 million won out of the transaction. Dojan is not playing the system, he is outright redrawing it. Now he's got enough capital to start moving, and one of the first places he moves is to the Loan Shark headquarters. The boss of this particular operation is named Huang Changxiup. He runs what is essentially a predatory financial organization wrapped in just enough legitimacy to avoid immediate prosecution. He has muscle, he has connections. He spent years making desperate families miserable and getting paid very well for it. Dojan walks into his building. Security tries to stop him at the door. Security fails to stop him at the door. Changsup is at his desk when Dojan arrives in his office, which is not where Changsup expected this meeting to happen. The power dynamic that Changsup has built his entire career on, the idea that he is the one with resources and leverage and muscle, evaporates within about 30 seconds. By the time it's over, Huang Changxiup, powerful gang executive, feared loan shark kingpin, is on his hands and knees, crawling, barking on command like an animal, in front of his own staff. His hand, for additional emphasis, has been subjected to a level of pain that ensures he will remember this conversation for the remainder of his life. The message is clear. This organization now works for Dojan's interests. Any debt connected to his grandmother's household is erased, and if Chang Seop wants to keep being a functioning human being, he will be a loyal, obedient, extremely cooperative resource going forward. Dojan walks out. The building is very quiet. The step-family situation is the next item on the list. Here's the history. After Dojan's mother died, his biological father's legitimate family made absolutely certain he was removed from their world. The stepmother, Hong Hee-ju, runs the T-Group corporate empire alongside her husband. She has a biological daughter, Dojan's stepsister, who she has raised to believe she is above contact with the illegitimate branch. These people have never acknowledged Dojan's existence, except to exclude it. He runs into them during a shopping trip, deliberately. His stepsister opens with condescension so thick it takes a moment to identify it as actual speech. Dojan returns it with the kind of calm, precise dismantling that only someone completely unbothered by their opinion can deliver. Hong Hee-ju herself steps in, trying to assert the weight of her corporate position, her status, her implicit threat. Dojan looks at her the way someone looks at a mild inconvenience. Then he tells her, very plainly, that whatever she thinks she has over him, she's already operating on borrowed time. She doesn't understand what that means yet. She will, because somewhere in the background of all of this, Dojan has been piecing together something disturbing. The original Seo Dojan didn't just end up dying in a void by accident. There was a specific reason he was at death's door. And that reason has a name: Kang Cheol-woo. Cheol-woo is a B-rank hero, corrupt all the way through. He was hired, by Hong Hee-ju, to solve the problem of her stepson the only way she was willing to consider. Trap him in a dangerous gate. Make sure he doesn't come back out. No body, no evidence, no inconvenient illegitimate heir claiming any connection to her family's wealth. That's the betrayal that almost killed the original body's soul. Dojan files this away. He's not in a hurry, but this bill will be paid. Before any of that, the world throws a curveball. A rift opens directly over his residential neighborhood. Not a small one, not the kind that gets contained quickly. A high-danger rift, yawning open right above the area where his grandmother lives, where Yoon-young goes to school, where he has been slowly building the beginnings of a stable life. The government response is to evacuate the civilians and send a proper hero team to address it. Dojan's response is to walk in alone. Not because he's reckless, because his family is in the potential blast radius and waiting for a committee decision is not in his nature. Inside the rift, the environment shifts completely. This isn't just a dungeon, it's a pocket world, dense with mana, foreign and wild and alive in a way that standard gates aren't. And somewhere in the center of it, Dojan finds something extraordinary: a world tree. In his old world, he knew what world trees meant. They are anchors of elemental power, nexuses of concentrated mana in a specific elemental alignment. And this one is burning. Fire mana. Pure, ancient, the kind that doesn't exist in diluted form on Earth's surface. Carcelian Levandian spent his past life pushing his limits in a world with far richer mana. He knows immediately what this opportunity is. He sits down under that tree and meditates for 28 days. Outside, the world assumes the worst. A rift that swallows someone whole and stays active for nearly a month. The official conclusion is that whoever went in didn't survive. His name shows up on the missing presumed list. Inside, Dojan is absorbing fire. Not metaphorically. He is pulling elemental flame mana directly into his cultivation base, restructuring his core energy around a new type of power. Eternal Embers, a firestone cultivation method that rewires how his mana generates and flows. When he eventually walks back out of the rift, he is a meaningfully different version of himself than when he entered. The agents waiting outside are from the Korea Hero Association. They've been monitoring the rift for weeks. They're not expecting anyone to walk out. So when Dojan just strolls through the gate looking unbothered, weapon in hand, materials loaded up from 28 days of hunting inside, they immediately move to contain him. Dojan distracts them with a junkyard explosion. A deliberately detonated distraction that gives him exactly the window he needs to disappear before the agents can get organized. By the time the smoke clears, he's already 2 neighborhoods away. Time for a bigger score. Those rare firestones, the mana crystals harvested from inside the World Tree Rift, are not common. They are not even close to common. A store manager at a high-end mana trade operation, when presented with Dojan's haul, has a quiet crisis trying to process what he's looking at. This grade of crystal doesn't show up on the market, ever. The transaction settles at 67 billion won. Not million, billion. Dojan now has real money, and he has a very specific vision for what he's building. But first, the confrontation that's been loading in the background finally arrives. S-Rank hunter Hun Juyeon has been watching Seo Dojan for a while now. That's her job, technically. She's South Korea's fourth S-Rank hero, one of only a handful of people on the entire planet who operate at that tier, and the Korea Hero Association has been feeding her reports about a mysterious, unlicensed individual who keeps doing things that shouldn't be physically possible. Tearing through a B-rank dungeon solo, dropping gate control agents, evading association pursuit after emerging alive from a month-long rift. The file on this person doesn't add up, and Juyeon is exactly the type who doesn't ignore things that don't add up. She corners him at a restaurant. Not aggressively. She's sharp enough to know that walking up to someone like Dojan with a confrontational posture is a fast way to have a bad afternoon. She comes in calm, politely, with the kind of social grace that comes from years of operating at the highest levels of the hero establishment. She wants to talk. She wants to understand what she's actually dealing with. The conversation is just getting interesting when Kang Cheol-woo walks through the door. Now, Cheol-woo doesn't know that Dojan knows. As far as this corrupt B-rank hero is concerned, the assignment was completed. The illegitimate kid got locked in a gate. That's done. This is just a coincidence, running into someone who shouldn't even be alive. But Dojan's eyes land on Cheol-woo the second he enters the room, and the temperature in the restaurant drops about 10 degrees. Cheol-woo realizes his mistake roughly half a second too late. What follows is not a fight. Fights have two participants. This is a sustained, methodical demonstration of exactly what happens when the person you were hired to quietly dispose of turns out to be something your employer never bothered to research. Cheol-woo gets taken apart with the kind of clinical efficiency that makes it clear Dojan isn't angry. He's just thorough. By the time it's over, Cheol-woo is in a condition that will not be improving significantly. Blind in one eye, crippled. He will not be going back to heroics. But before Dojan finishes, he does something smart. He records it. Full confession. Who hired him, what the job was, what Hong Hee-ju paid him to do to her own stepson. The whole sordid arrangement, on video, delivered by the man who carried it out. Juyeon watches all of this with the expression of someone recalibrating everything they thought they knew about a situation. After, she doesn't run. She doesn't call it in. Instead, she makes a decision that changes how the rest of this story goes. She becomes Dojan's legal guarantor, his registered representative within the Hero Association framework, which means that whatever heat comes his way from official channels, and it will come, she's the buffer between him and it. It's a significant professional risk for her. She's staking her reputation on someone the establishment doesn't even have a clean file on. But she's seen what he can do, and she's not the type to walk away from something this interesting. Their partnership, if you can call it that at this stage, which is charitable, quickly develops a rhythm. Juyeon handles the paperwork, the political navigation, the phone calls from association officials who are increasingly confused about who this person is and why their usual pressure tactics aren't producing results. Dojan goes into dangerous places and comes back with things that make career hunters want to retire. She also, quietly, starts spending time with his family. His grandmother takes to her immediately. Yoon-young, his little sister, who is 12 and fiercely protective of her brother, in the way that only a kid who's watched someone she loves get hurt can be, initially keeps her distance. But Juyeon is patient, and warm, and good at this, in a way that doesn't feel performed. Dojan watches all of it from the edges. The sword god from a destroyed world, who rebuilt himself around a single promise to a dying boy, watching an S-rank hero voluntarily insert herself into the small domestic circle he's been fighting to protect. He thinks of her as the moth to his flame. He means it with complete sincerity and zero awareness of how it sounds. Then the association moves against him anyway. Hong Hee-ju, having apparently decided that subtlety already failed once, pivots to institutional force. She has connections, she has money, and she has a corrupt prosecutor, Park Cha-leong, who is willing to execute an emergency arrest order on someone the establishment has already been side-eyeing for a while. The arrest order drops while Dojan is not particularly concerned about it. Julian, however, moves instantly. This is where her value as a legal representative becomes extremely clear. She doesn't just show up with paperwork, she shows up with documentation of Park Cholyong's own crimes, pulled from channels that someone at her level of access can reach without much trouble. The prosecutor who was supposed to be the weapon against Dojan ends up being the one getting dismantled. His record, his history of accepting payments to file false charges, his relationship with the T-Group corporate machine, all of it surfaces in the hearing. Park Cholyong is dismissed. The arrest order collapses. Hong Hee-ju spends a lot of money on a result she did not get. And Dojan, who sat through most of this with the patience of someone who has survived actual apocalyptic monster wars, files one more thing away for later. Before the stepmother situation gets its final reckoning, the world pulls everyone's attention to something significantly larger. The UK has a bug crisis. Not a pest control situation, an actual monster-class insect catastrophe, an infestation of creatures that have been multiplying inside a rift zone and are now spilling into populated areas at a rate that's starting to tip toward actual national emergency. The international hero community is mobilizing. It's the kind of event that puts everyone's capabilities on display. Dojan knows exactly how to solve it. Red flower ant sap, a naturally occurring substance with powerful paralytic properties against this specific category of insect monster. He passes the information to Julian casually, the way someone mentions they happen to know a shortcut. Julian takes it to the right channels. The UK crisis, which had the international community bracing for a drawn-out conflict, gets resolved with a swiftness that leaves everyone quietly stunned. The heroes who show up to help don't fully understand why the insects keep falling over, but they're not complaining. Dojan never takes credit. He doesn't need it yet, but the same event delivers something much more concerning on the other side of the ledger. In the UK, after the bug situation is addressed, a rift shatters open in a way that's different from the standard gate model. Not a controlled passage, not a regulated portal, a shattered breach, violent, uncontrolled, tearing through with enough force to level the surrounding area. And out of it walks someone, not a monster, a person, or something shaped like one, heavily scarred, clad in ancient-looking armor that doesn't match any known hero equipment database. Moving through the wreckage of the breach site with absolute calm, cutting down British military personnel who move to intercept using telekinetic green rings that slice through standard equipment without resistance. This figure isn't confused, isn't disoriented from whatever transition they just survived. They look at the destruction around them like they're assessing a starting point. Then they say, very clearly, with full intent, that Earth's current inhabitants are too weak, that the global mana concentration needs to increase, and that the people unable to handle that increase are simply going to be purged. Then they walk away. Nobody stops them. Nobody can. This is the first signal that whatever Dojan came from, the collapsed world, the monster apocalypse, the forces that erased his homeland, might not have stayed contained on the other side of the dimensional barrier. Dojan, when the report reaches him, shows no visible alarm. His face does the thing it does when he's processing something serious behind extremely calm eyes. He doesn't explain what he knows. Not yet. Instead, the Hero Association officially fast-tracks his registration. Julian's backing, combined with the mounting evidence of what this person is actually capable of, pushes the bureaucratic process faster than it usually moves. Seo Dojan becomes South Korea's 8th S-rank hero on record. He gets a hunter ID, he gets official standing. He also immediately uses his new access to commission something he's been planning since that B-rank snake dungeon months ago. The Viper Fang he extracted, enormous, dense, structurally unique, goes to Master Craftsman Choi, a specialist who works at the intersection of engineering and mana forging, one of the best in the business. Dojan's specifications are precise, 180 centimeters, Viper Fang as the core material, Cyclops blood harvested during subsequent raids as the binding and tempering agent, Grade 7 mana absorption capability built into the blade itself, so that every strike against a mana-reinforced enemy feeds directly back into the weapon's output. Choi looks at the spec sheet and asks how long Dojan has been planning this. Dojan doesn't answer, he just asks when it'll be ready. The sword gets forged, and when Dojan picks it up for the first time, the weight is exactly what he expected. The balance is exactly what he needed. After spending months working through Earth's monster catalog with techniques calibrated for a world with much higher mana density, this weapon finally matches the scale of what he's actually doing. Now the international expeditions begin. Brazil. The specific problem in Brazil is dark mana contamination, a spreading corruption seeping through multiple rifts in the region, degrading the local environment and producing monsters that are chemically different from standard gate creatures. Nastier. Harder to clear with conventional hero team strategies. The international community has been working the problem slowly and expensively. Dojan's approach to it is considerably less gradual. He runs the contaminated rifts like someone clearing a maintenance backlog. Methodical, fast, utterly disinterested in the tactical complications that are giving other teams trouble. The dark mana contamination that's been fouling these zones for months gets addressed at a pace that makes the Brazilian government's incident response coordinator briefly lose the ability to form sentences. During one of the underwater rift clearances, he encounters something new, a spatial fish. A unique creature, not particularly dangerous in combat terms, but one that exists partially in a subspace dimension. Its body is essentially a living pocket void, a contained spatial anomaly that travels with the creature. Dojan subdues it, carefully, with more finesse than he shows toward things that actually threaten him. Then he absorbs the subspace. The creature's pocket dimension, which has effectively no size limit from the inside, becomes his personal infinite storage unit. Materials, equipment, harvested dungeon resources, all of it can now travel with him without weight, without volume, without any external indication that he's carrying anything. A legendary warrior now has an infinitely deep pocket. The Brazil operation just became significantly more profitable. He bills the Brazilian government per rift cleared. The rate he sets for this service is not modest. The government, watching their multi-month contamination crisis get solved in days by one person, pays it without the extended negotiation they were probably planning. Millions of dollars per clear. The math works out well for Dojan, but Brazil also sets up the confrontation that's been loading on a much larger stage. S-rank hunter Kang Yong-pyo is not someone most people in the hero establishment want to say the wrong thing about. Cousin to Cheol-woo, the man Dojan already put in a hospital. Former criminal network operator who graduated into heroics with enough power to make his past inconvenient to prosecute. He accepted a contract hit on Dojan worth several billion won, placed by parties who'd prefer to see the sword god stopped before he becomes any more of a problem. Yong-pyo is the kind of dangerous that operates by not giving enemies enough time to prepare. He moves first, and he moves hard. Dojan has been aware of the contract for a while. He's also been watching Yong-pyo's network, the connections, the alliances, the specific partnerships with Yakuza-affiliated groups that give him international reach. One of those partnerships involves Ryoma Takashi, ex-Yakuza, current S-ranked Japanese hero, the kind of person who solves problems with violence first and never bothers with second. Takashi makes the mistake of moving against Julian, not against Dojan, against Julian, an attempt to pressure the leverage point, to complicate Dojan's situation by going after the person closest to him in his current life structure. This is a miscalculation of historic proportions. Dojan's response to someone threatening Julian is the same as his response to most things: immediate, overwhelming, and delivered without the kind of emotional heat that would make it feel personal. It's not personal, it's just consequence. Takashi gets a public beating that removes all ambiguity about who the stronger party is. Forced to his knees, forced to publicly acknowledge exactly what he attempted and exactly why it failed. The spectacle of a ranking S-rank hero from Japan on the ground begging is not a small diplomatic incident. People take notice. But Dojan has a longer play in mind for the Yong-pyo situation. During the victory gala for the Brazilian expedition, a formal international event, decorated, celebrated, with every relevant hero and government official in the room, Dojan executes it. He has recordings. Yong-pyo's own voice, obtained through the network Dojan has been quietly building, detailing assassination plans against fellow heroes. Explicit names, methods, amounts paid, specific discussions about assaulting female heroes that are so plainly criminal that the silence in the ballroom when the recording plays is absolute. The audio gets blasted through the gala sound system, and Kang Yong-pyo is standing in that ballroom when it happens. Every eye in the room turns toward him, every camera, every international official. There is no version of this moment where he recovers from it publicly. Yong-pyo processes the situation for about 4 seconds. Then he does something so extreme that it shocks even a room full of people who have seen a lot of violence. He drives his bare hand through the chest of his Yakuza accomplice, the man who had been lobotomized and used as the recording device, and rips the heart out, right there, in the ballroom, in front of everyone. Then he runs. The room erupts. The international fallout begins immediately, and Yongpyo, a man who operated for years in the gray zone between heroics and organized crime, is suddenly the most wanted person in the global hero establishment. The clock is running on his reckoning. But Dojan has one more thing to handle first: the Step family. Hong Hee-ju has spent years building the T-Group brand into something untouchable. Corporate prestige, media connections, the kind of wealth that makes legal problems evaporate before they become visible. She has used every tool available to her to ensure that the illegitimate branch of the family tree stays invisible, stays poor, stays irrelevant. She is about to discover what happens when the person she tried to have murdered decides it's time to talk to the press. Dojan doesn't go into the press conference angry. He doesn't go in looking for sympathy either. He walks in with the calm of someone who has already calculated exactly what each word will cost the other side, and he starts talking. The story he tells is simple, true, and devastating. He is the biological son of the T-Group patriarch, born illegitimate. Raised in poverty with a grandmother who scraped to keep them alive and a little sister who grew up not knowing what financial stability felt like. When his mother died, the family responsible for half his existence threw him out at 7 years old and made sure he stayed out. No support, no acknowledgement. A child, discarded, because his existence was inconvenient to a corporate image. He presents the documentation, the financial records showing the household's struggle, the legal paper trail confirming his biological connection to the T-Group family, the timeline of abandonment, detailed and precise. And then he gets to Hong Hee-ju specifically. What she arranged, who she hired, what the instructions were regarding a GATE and a B-rank hero named Kang Cheol-woo, and the specific outcome she was paying for. The recorded confession, Cheol-woo's own voice, extracted during that restaurant encounter months ago, plays in the press conference room. The cameras are rolling. Every outlet. By the time Dojan finishes speaking, T-Group's corporate stock has lost 30% of its value and is still falling. Hong Hee-ju's public standing, the carefully constructed image of a powerful, dignified corporate matriarch, is rubble. The story spreads faster than their PR team can respond to any single piece of it. Inside the T-Group household, the response to this catastrophic public collapse is not measured. The patriarch, a man who has spent his life obsessing over image and control, turns on Hong Hee-ju with the kind of rage that only comes from watching something you built your identity around get destroyed on live television. The woman who orchestrated a murder plot to protect her position in that family gets struck by the man she was protecting her position for. Justice served by the system she created. Dojan doesn't need to do anything further on that front. But the press conference does something else besides torch the Step family. It clarifies Dojan's public identity. People know his name now. They know his face. They know he's the 8th S-rank hero. And they know, in general terms, without the classified specifics, that he is not someone to miscalculate. The next project, The Fortress. Dojan has 67 billion won and a very specific architectural vision. He targets the Guro district. Seoul's geography has areas with different strategic profiles, and Guro has what he needs. Enough land to build on the scale he's planning, with subterranean access points suitable for the reinforcement system he has in mind. He acquires the plots efficiently, with the kind of capital that turns normally slow real estate processes into same-week transactions. The construction isn't standard. Below the foundation, he installs mana stones. Not decoratively, structurally. The entire subterranean base of the compound is threaded with dense magical material that fundamentally changes how the building responds to force. The technical term for what this achieves is shock absorption at a level that existing engineering frameworks don't have a category for. An attack that would register as a significant seismic event on monitoring equipment hits this foundation and simply stops. The energy has nowhere to go that isn't the ground itself, which the mana stone lattice disperses across an area too wide to concentrate. He doesn't just build a house, he builds a fortress that looks like a house. The interior gets designed for his grandmother's comfort specifically, every medical accommodation she could need, the nicest furniture he can source, a heated floor system that her joints, which have been hurting for years, in ways she never mentioned to him, because she was terrified of wasting his money, will finally get relief from. The discovery that she was sick, that she had been bedridden at points, hiding genuine illness from him because she didn't want to burden the boy she was watching exhaust himself to keep them fed, that hit differently than most things. The sword god, who watched an entire civilization fall without flinching, found out his grandmother was suffering in silence and had to take a quiet moment. Yunyong gets her own space. Safe. Permanent. Everything a 12-year-old who spent her childhood in cramped, unstable housing deserves. The outer compound gets sentinels. 5 death knights, bound and conscripted from dungeon raids where Dojan specifically targeted the type of undead military-class monster that produces them. Binding a death knight requires a specific technique that most hunters don't know exists and couldn't execute even if they did. 5 of them, stationed in the compound's defensive perimeter, operating under Dojan's command structure as autonomous guards. Any unauthorized party attempting to breach this compound will have a very bad time before they ever get close to the building. And then there's the dragon, Caesarion. Here's what the world knows about Caesarion-class dragons. They are apex dungeon bosses. The kind of monster that requires a coordinated A-rank team. Minimum, and even then, casualties are expected. Park Hale, the S-rank master of the Sweet Life Guild who prides himself on elite raid leadership, has lost heroes in confrontations with significantly lesser variants of this creature type. The things are 20 meters of hostile, mana-saturated predator, and history in this world is littered with the records of teams that underestimated them. Dojan killed one previously, in the restricted rift zone that Julian quietly snuck him into after their restaurant meeting, the zone that was supposed to be off-limits to anyone without serious clearance. The Caesarion boss that was inside that rift, a creature that had previously wiped out A-rank teams sent to address it, went down in a single strike. One strike. 20 meters of Dragon Apex Predator. Single strike. Julian had to sit down for a moment after watching it happen. For the fortress, Dojan doesn't kill the Caesarion. He tames it. This distinction is important. A dead dragon is impressive. A living bound Caesarion operating as a guard animal inside your compound's perimeter is a completely different category of territorial deterrent. Anyone who knows what that creature is, and any hunter worth their rank will immediately recognize it, understands instantly that the entity who runs this property has capabilities that exceed the established framework. The dragon settles into the compound grounds with the resigned acceptance of something that has been very clearly outmatched and has chosen the pragmatic response. Dojan feeds it. The relationship is not warm, exactly, but it's functional. The Caesarion guards the perimeter. The Death Knights guard the structure. The Mana Stone Foundation guards against direct structural assault. His grandmother sits inside all of this in a premium massage chair, in a heated room, completely comfortable and completely safe, probably watching television. This is the promise fulfilled. Not in the abstract, not someday. Right now, in solid stone and bound monsters and 67 billion won invested in walls that cannot fall. Julian sees the finished compound for the first time and is quiet for a long moment. Then she asks if there's a room for her. Dojan, with the interpersonal awareness of a man who has spent most of his cognitive life thinking about swords and mana, takes slightly longer than ideal to respond. But the answer is yes. She starts bringing food, showing up to cook meals for the household in a way that transitions from occasional to regular, without anyone formally acknowledging it. His grandmother starts asking where Julian is on days she doesn't come. Yunyong, who spent weeks giving her the polite but cautious treatment, eventually cracks completely. Caught one afternoon teaching Julian a card game with the kind of easy laughter that means the walls are fully down. Dojan watches his family get bigger without quite knowing how to describe what that means to him. The sword god from a dead world, sitting in a kitchen that smells like whatever Julian is cooking, listening to his sister argue cheerfully about card rules with the 4th S-rank hero in the country. Living a life so different from anything his original existence contained that it barely feels like the same species of experience. He lets himself have it, not fully, not without the background awareness that things are not resolved yet, but he lets himself have it. Because Kang Yongpyo is still out there. After the gala broadcast, after the heart was ripped out of his accomplice in front of an international audience, after every law enforcement body with jurisdiction started moving simultaneously, Yongpyo ran. He went underground in the way that someone with his resources and his criminal network history knows how to go underground. Changing locations, burning his visible associations, waiting for something to clarify. What clarifies for him is desperation. His resources are draining. His network is compromised. Dojan's systematic exposure of his dealings has collapsed the alliance structures Yongpyo relied on for protection, and the asset he used to have, his S-rank combat capability, his status in the hero establishment, is worthless now. That's gone. He is a fugitive. The one move left that feels like it might work is the one that violent, desperate people always reach for. Go after what the target loves. He targets the fortress. Specifically, his plan is to use his S-rank combat ability to execute an attack on the compound's structure that would constitute something approaching a natural disaster. His particular power set, when fully deployed, generates force on the level of a significant seismic event. The idea is that the fortress, whatever clever things Dojan has built in there, absorbs the attack as intended, but the shockwave propagates. The grandmother, the sister, people inside who cannot survive what S-rank destructive output at full commitment looks like when it's directed at a residential structure, hold them as leverage, force Dojan to come out and settle it directly. Yongpyo has also, at some point during his underground period, acquired something illegal. A black market enhancement potion, the kind that temporarily transforms the user's physical capabilities into something categorically beyond what their baseline allows. His arm, already capable of generating devastating force at S-rank, undergoes a chemical transformation into something closer to a geological weapon. Arm swollen, veined with dark enhancement energy, looking like a tectonic plate decided to become a fist. He arrives at the Guro compound and deploys it all. The attack hits the foundation. Nothing happens to the foundation. The Mana Stone lattice absorbs it completely. The dispersal system works exactly as designed. The shockwave that should have turned the building's interior into a catastrophic vibration event doesn't propagate past the first layer of the underground reinforcement network. It just stops. Inside, his grandmother feels nothing. She is not knocked out of her massage chair. She does not spill whatever she is drinking. The thermal floor continues providing heat to her joints. The television continues running. She doesn't even look up. Outside, Yongpyo is standing in the aftermath of the most powerful strike he can physically produce, staring at a compound that has not responded in any visible way. The Death Knights are now moving toward him with the unhurried confidence of entities that have no biological fear response. The Caesarian has turned its full attention toward him with the expression of a creature that has eaten things significantly larger than one S-rank hero. And Dojan comes out of the compound. Not running. Walking. Yongpyo, cornered, depleted from the full deployment of his enhancement potion, facing a man who is visibly unbothered by the seismic attack that just failed to do anything, makes one last attempt. He tries to use the residual power of the Titan arm transformation to force the issue. Dojan slams him into the reinforced dirt of his own compound, then kicks him hard enough that Yongpyo briefly becomes aerial. When he comes back down, he stays down. The Death Knights contain him. The fight, if it qualifies as a fight, which is generous, is over in the time it takes to describe it. Kang Yongpyo, S-rank hunter, criminal mastermind, man who ripped a heart out of someone's chest in an international ballroom, who accepted a $1 billion contract hit and ran international criminal networks and terrorized anyone who threatened his position, is an unconscious mess in the courtyard of the fortress he tried to destroy. The authorities get a phone call. They come and collect him. Dojan watches them load Yongpyo into the containment vehicle from the compound entrance. His expression doesn't change. Behind him, his grandmother is probably asking if anyone wants tea. The compound settles into something that feels, for the first time in this entire story, like actual peace. Not the absence of conflict. There are still open threads in the world. The scarred invader who walked out of that shattered UK breach is somewhere on Earth, moving toward whatever his purge plan looks like in practice. The dark mana contamination spreading through global rifts still doesn't have a confirmed origin. The mystery of why that contamination exists at all, and who or what is engineering the conditions for it, sits unresolved in the background of everything. But inside the Guro compound, with the Death Knights on rotation and a Caesarian dragon doing perimeter checks, and a Mana Stone foundation that laughed at an S-rank seismic strike, inside all of that, Dojan's family is safe. Genuinely, structurally, permanently safe. Not provisionally safe. Not safe until the next problem. Safe in the way that required 67 billion won and a legendary warrior's full attention to engineer. The promise to the original Seo Dojan is kept, and the boy who made that promise is starting to notice what life feels like when it isn't entirely organized around a single urgent goal. It feels, mostly, like Julian being in his kitchen. The dynamic between them has been shifting gradually throughout everything, so gradually that neither of them formally named it while it was happening, which is how these things tend to work when one party is a legendary swordsman with limited experience in domestic emotional territory, and the other party is one of the most capable women in the country who has developed the very specific social condition of going completely shy around one particular person. Julian, who negotiated with government prosecutors without blinking, who handled international incident management at the UK bug crisis with crisp competence, who stared down corrupt association officials and political pressure and emerged completely intact every time, becomes a slightly different person when Dojan looks at her directly for too long. Something in her composure shifts. A warmth arrives in her face that she doesn't entirely succeed at managing. She knows it. He notices it. Neither of them says anything about it, in the great tradition of two people who are very clearly falling for each other and have agreed by unspoken mutual consensus to pretend that isn't what's happening. What they do instead, they exist in each other's space. She cooks for the household, real food, not takeout, the kind of cooking that requires actual time and care and knowledge of what specific people like to eat. His grandmother gets dishes that accommodate her appetite and her digestion. Yunyang gets the things she mentioned once, in passing, that she missed from childhood. Dojan gets whatever is left over, delivered to wherever he's sitting, without ceremony. He eats it. He doesn't comment on the cooking beyond finishing every serving, which is its own language. She starts staying later. Then she starts having a room. Then she starts having a presence in the household that is simply assumed. Her schedule becomes part of the compound's rhythm in the way that furniture becomes part of a room. You stop noticing it as an addition and start noticing its absence instead. Yunyang, who cracked her defensive shell around Juhyun completely after the card game incident, has by this point essentially adopted her. She drags Juhyun into conversations about school. She asks for her opinion on things in the conspiratorial way that kids seek alliance from adults who aren't their direct authority figures. On a family trip to an amusement park, a thing that happens, in the middle of all of this, a completely ordinary family outing, Yunyang walks between the two of them and holds both their hands and does not think anything unusual about it. Dojan looks down at that, his sister, small and confident and happy, holding his hand on one side and Julian's on the other. Walking into an amusement park like this is simply how things are. The sword god from a fallen world, who watched everything he loved get erased in a monster apocalypse, who rebuilt himself around a single dying boy's wish, walks into a theme park with his little sister and the woman who staked her professional career on him, and buys overpriced food, and goes on rides, and doesn't think about gates or rifts or power levels for several hours. It's the most alien experience he's had since arriving on Earth. He likes it considerably more than he expected, but the moments that hit hardest aren't the big ones. They're the small ones. The ones that arrive without announcement. His grandmother, one evening, pulls him aside. She's been doing better physically. The heated floor, the medical accommodations, the consistent meals, and the absence of financial terror have all done measurable things for a body that spent years running on stress and insufficient rest. She looks better, she moves better, but she wants to talk about something she held back for too long. She tells him she was sick, not in the way he suspected, worse. There were periods where she couldn't get out of bed. Medical appointments she skipped because the money wasn't there, and she was terrified that if he found out how bad it was, he would pour resources into her treatment instead of the goals he was working toward. She hid it, for his sake, because she loved him. Dojan sits with that information. The sword god who never flinched at a dungeon boss, who looked at a Caesarian dragon and calculated a single-strike solution, who processed the apocalypse of his homeworld without visible fracture, he sits with the knowledge that the woman who raised this body, who kept this family alive through things he didn't witness but can now fully understand, spent months suffering in silence because she was afraid of burdening him. He doesn't say a lot. He's not built for grand speeches on that register, but he takes her hand, and he tells her, very plainly, that she is never going to make that calculation again, that whatever she needs, immediately and without delay and without any consideration of cost, is what she gets. That the whole point of everything he built around them was specifically so she would never have to weigh her own well-being against someone else's comfort. She cries a little. He lets her. He doesn't try to talk her out of it or move past it quickly. Then she asks if he's going to marry Julian. He needs a moment before responding to that. The answer he eventually gives is not a no. Yoonyoung's emotional confession arrives separately, in the way that important things from children often do. Sideways, disguised as something else, dropped into the middle of an ordinary afternoon. She asks him not to be a hero anymore, not as a tantrum, not with anger. She asks it quietly, with the specific kind of control that a kid uses when they are trying very hard not to cry about something that has been sitting inside them for a long time. She tells him that she knows he's strong, she knows he can handle himself, but every time he goes into a gate or a rift or somewhere dangerous, there's a part of her that is terrified he won't come back. She has already lost people. In the way that children in difficult situations lose people, incrementally, through circumstances rather than dramatic events, people who were supposed to be permanent becoming absent. The original Seo Dojan's childhood was full of that specific kind of loss. Yoonyoung carries it in a way she's never had anyone help her process. She doesn't want to lose her brother. Dojan looks at his 12-year-old sister, telling him, as directly as she can manage while trying not to show how scared she is, that she needs him to exist more than she needs him to be impressive. He pulls her in. He tells her he's not going anywhere. He tells her that everything he does, the gates and the rifts and the monsters and all of it, every single bit of it is because she and their grandmother are the destination he's always moving toward. Not the mission, not the power, the destination. He also tells her that he is objectively impossible to kill, which makes her laugh while she's still crying, which is exactly the right result. The emotional accounting of this household, over months of accumulated small moments like these, has done something to the sword god's internal landscape that raw combat never could. He arrived in this body carrying the weight of a destroyed civilization, the cold competence of a legendary warrior, and a promise to protect two people who didn't know he existed. He is now, undeniably, part of a family. Not carrying them, part of them. The distinction matters enormously. And then one night, he dreams. Not a training dream, not a memory of his old world, not the specific nightmare texture that comes when he thinks about what happened to his people, his country, the world that no longer exists. He dreams of a boy, the real Seo Dojan. Young, tired, wearing the specific exhaustion of someone who spent their whole life trying to deserve things that were never going to be given to them. Standing in whatever space exists between states of being, looking at Carcelian with an expression that has resolved into something that isn't grief. The boy looks at him. He looks at the compound, at the warmth inside it, at the grandmother and the sister and the woman who makes food and stays late and holds hands at amusement parks. He sees the promise, kept in full and then some. He smiles. It's the smile of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time, finally putting it down. Not with relief exactly, with completion. He doesn't speak at length. There's no dramatic monologue, no formal farewell speech. Just that smile, and a feeling that passes between them. Acknowledgement, gratitude, the wordless transfer of something that needed to be given, and then the boy is gone, not the body. The soul that originally occupied it, that died in a void and made one final wish and trusted a legendary warrior from a different world to carry it forward. That soul passes on, wherever it goes, contentedly. Dojan wakes up. He lies still for a moment in the early morning of his fortress bedroom, listening to the building around him. Quiet, stable, structurally sound in ways that would stop an earthquake. Somewhere nearby his grandmother is probably already awake, doing whatever her morning routine has evolved into, now that her mornings involve comfort instead of worry. Down the hall, Yoonyoung is still asleep in the way that 12-year-olds sleep. Completely, without reservation, the way you can only sleep when you feel genuinely safe. And Jujian is here, in this building, in this household, making it larger than it was. Carcelian Lavandian, the sword god, the last warrior of a fallen civilization, the being who agreed to carry a dying boy's final wish into a completely different world, stays still in the early quiet and understands something. He is not carrying the promise anymore. He completed it. It is done. What he is carrying now is something different. Not a mission, not a debt, not a borrowed purpose worn like armor until the original owner releases it. A life, his own, built from the materials of someone else's wreckage and a teenager's single wish and months of dungeons and money and face slaps, delivered to people who deserved every one of them, slowly, improbably, becoming something genuine. He gets up. He goes to the kitchen. He makes tea, because he has learned that making tea in the morning is what you do when you live in a place that has a kitchen, and people who are going to wake up and want tea. Julian appears in the kitchen doorway 17 minutes later, hair not fully organized yet, squinting in the morning light, wearing an expression that suggests she did not fully anticipate encountering him, standing there making tea at this hour. The composure that she maintains in every professional context she has ever occupied is entirely absent. She looks at him standing in his own kitchen, being a person who makes morning tea. He looks back. "Sit down," he says. "It's ready." She sits down. He puts a cup in front of her. She wraps both hands around it. Neither of them says anything else for a while, in the specific, comfortable silence of two people who have stopped needing to fill space with words. Outside, a Death Knight completes its patrol rotation. In the compound grounds, the Caesarian dragon turns its massive head toward the morning light and exhales slowly, a thin line of smoke drifting up from somewhere near its jaw. The Mana Stone Foundation hums at frequencies too low to hear, steady and permanent, doing what it was built to do. His grandmother walks into the kitchen 12 minutes later, takes one look at the two of them sitting at the table, and decides to make breakfast without mentioning what she's obviously thinking. She is, however, smiling in a way that she makes no effort to conceal. Yunyang arrives at maximum velocity, slides on the kitchen floor in socked feet, and demands to know what's for breakfast before she has fully stopped moving. The sword god drinks his tea at his own kitchen table, with his family around him, and the world outside still complicated and unresolved, and full of threats that will eventually require his attention. The scarred invader from the UK is still out there. The dark mana contamination still has no named source. The mystery of why the dimensional barriers are cracking open with increasing frequency, and what might be engineering it, and whether Carcelian's destroyed world has anything to do with the forces behind it. All of that is still coming. The horizon is not clear, but the kitchen is warm, the tea is ready, the people he swore to protect are safe and laughing and alive and within arm's reach. For this morning, that is everything. For this morning, the sword god has nothing left to prove and nowhere urgent to be, and someone passing him a second cup of tea, and the look on his face, if you knew enough to understand what that face had seen, what those hands had done, what that soul had survived before landing in this world and this kitchen, and this ordinary, extraordinary morning, is something very close to peace. And peace, it turns out, is the hardest thing in any world to actually earn. He earned it.